Students, this is the quotation introduction lecture. Now, I'm going to be going through a lot of items about quotation. Some of them might be familiar to you, some of them might be unfamiliar to you. It's hard to know exactly where every individual student is when they arrive because some of you are very comfortable with quotation, others, you've been kind of just, going through the motions of it, and some people are completely unfamiliar with quotation. So my approach in this class is to always assume that we're starting at rock bottom, that I'm introducing everyone for the first time to quotation. If that doesn't apply to you, fantastic. Sometimes also this might introduce some people to elements of quotation that they weren't really aware of before we started. There will be a lot of quotation exercises. We're going to be doing weekly exercises on quotation for almost the entire rest of the course. So if it feels like you're not sure what you're doing the first week, that's okay. We're going to be doing this for a long time. You're going to be having in the wild examples of quotation. You're going to be doing quotation exercises for me. And of course, quotation will be in many of your homework assignments and several short writing assignments as well as of course your essays. So we're going to be going through this in great detail and at length. So, and for all of these, pretty much you will be able to redo them until you really have either the hang of it or you're getting pretty used to how I'm asking you to do this. So first things first, I'm going to start with just a short overview lecture of quotation. So what is quotation as we are using it in this class? Well, for one thing, quotation is different than dialogue or quotes in a news article. And when a fiction article author is creating dialogue, like when Flannery O'Connor's having Julian and his mother speak, you can see that their words are in quotation marks, like these helpful little buddies I'm putting up on the screen right now. That's a double quotation mark, stop and start. So when an author is creating dialogue, those are that's not what we're calling quotation. That's considered dialogue. When in our news articles, so for example, you're going to be listening to several podcasts, they are going to be doing what we refer to as quoting sources, but those are the exact words of people they were talking to. And whenever they have something that's in those double quotes, that's precisely what an individual said, and they're using their exact language. That's a little bit closer to what we do. When you as a student are using quotations, you are using the language of someone else. That someone else could be a author. So anything that you took to word for word from the Everything That Rises Must Converge, for example, everything that you took word for word that's in Flannery O'Connor's language, whether it's dialogue or description, anything from that story, if it's her language, not yours, then it belongs in double quotes. If you think, well, I'll just change a word or two, that's also considered using her language. If you want to make sure that you don't inadvertently use someone else's language, keep the source closed. So don't have the Flannery O'Connor story open in front of you when you are writing homework, answering a prompt, or an essay. If you, for example, want to use her language in a quote or anyone else's, you should open up the source of the text, look directly at it, write down precisely what you're going to quote, and then close the source again and set it aside. That way you're using accurate quotations, but you're not inadvertently using someone else's language. So that's, kind of the basics of what quotation is. Now, something to remember is that quotation is used to support your argument and ideas. Like an example, has been used. So examples, if I'm saying, oh, well, Julian is a racist person because he does this, because he is imagining, marrying a Black woman in order to use her to get to his mother, like this. That's me using an example in my own words. If I'm saying to myself, oh, that line from Flannery O'Connor where he's talking about, his imaginary, black wife and this and that, and the language that's used is going to really help me argue and explain why he's racist. That is a good time to use a quotation, but remember, a quotation is used to support your argument. Quotation should never be used just to fill some space or bulk up length. Basically, quotation should never be more than 10% of a assignment. Now, this is if you're working in, most, liberal arts fields. If you're writing a science paper or doing a different kind of assignment or a journalism assignment, different rules apply, and a science professor or a journalism professor would give you different standards to use. But unless you're doing a hard science research paper for a science journal or an article for your local newspaper, you're not going to use more than 10% quotes. Anything more than that, and you're starting to kind of really edge into, you're not writing your own paper, you're creating a hodgepodge of quotes. So that 10%, really, you should keep an eye on that wherever you go. So quotes don't belong in thesis or conclusion paragraphs. Those are just your voice. Quotes belong in body paragraphs. Okay. Now, quotes should never begin or end a paragraph because they need to be introduced with your words and phrasing, and they also are the beginning of an argument or persuasive idea, not the conclusion, not the end of it. Basically, if you have a quotation, it needed to be introduced with your language, and when I see a quote, I need to see then an explanation and use of that quote. Quotes never conclude an argument. Okay, let's see what's next. Quotes never support a factual statement, just interpretive statements. If you say Julian and his mother got on the bus, yeah, that happened, we all saw it happen, that's not an interpretive statement, that's just a reference to factual events from the story. We all agree that it happened. Interpretive statements would be Julian is racist in the story because he imagines, using people, black people in order to upset his mother. That is an interpretive statement that needs to be explained and supported, and you can use quotations for that. So that's the difference between, keep an eye on that. That's factual, very important to understand the differences between factual and interpretive, statements. Okay, quotes need to be used in balance. Just as we just talked about, more than 10%, just going to reiterate that because it's really important. For every line of quotation, there needs to be about 2 to 3 lines of your analysis. If you use a quote, you need to make it worth its weight. So I need to then see you. If you use a 2-line quote, I should really see 4 to 6 lines of you analyzing and discussing that quote. Otherwise, I just look and say, why was this there? What was its purpose? What did it do? How did it add to your argument? How did it push your argument forward? Remember, quotations give you more to discuss. They don't finish a discussion. Okay, so a quote does not, conclude an argument. It gives you a piece of evidence to discuss and analyze further. Again, quotations help you expand an argument they don't finish it on. Okay. All right. It would be as if I said, oh, well, Julian is a racist. And you said, well, why is that? And I read a part of the book and said, and then closed it. And that was it. That's not an argument. That's just me shoving a piece of, Flannery O'Connor in your face. You need to explain how that supports your argument. You need to prove why it was important to use it. Okay. So again, this is why quotation, again, quotations should never end a paragraph. That's a bad use of a quotation. Okay. Again, remember, dialogue in a story and a quotation in a journalistic article, or a news article, those are different rules. They can end paragraphs because completely different rules apply. You're not in a journalism class right now, guys. We're just working how to use these quotations, okay? Quotations must be exact to the text. Is it a paraphrase? Paraphrasing? And specific rules. If you're too close to the text or if you're paraphrasing, generally that means that you have the book open in front of you. You can avoid inadvertent paraphrases just by having the text closed. You're not going to accidentally use Flannery O'Connor's exact words. If you are trying to quote, it has to be precise. You have to have it open in front of you. You have to make sure that every comma is there, every word is exact. Everything has to be precise when you're using someone else's language. A double quote tells me this isn't your language, this is someone else's, so you have to be accurate. Okay. Okay. A quote should be important. If your quote is just repeating what you said in your context sentence, why bother? Now, if you just said it, why am I reading a quote about it? This is actually one of the most common misuses of quotation that I see. You make a statement and I go, oh yes, that's right there. And then you put in a quotation that does exactly the same thing. If you do exactly the same thing, then eliminate the quotation because I'd rather hear your words explaining it. Okay. One of the important things that we're going to be working on in this class is how to use quotations, but also how to use them appropriately and not just willy-nilly. That's one of the reasons why you're going to be, I generally don't encourage a lot of quotation. A quote should be important. It should be key. In the kind of writing you're doing, you generally won't use a whole lot of quotations because most of it will be just your argument and your supports. Okay. A quote must be kept honest. Don't quote out of context. We've all seen the examples of that happening, just saying like, oh, well, I really want to argue this. So what if I take this source and cut out 3/4 of what the quote is and just say, oh, see, they say like, I ... like rabbits ... for dinner. And what the quote actually said was, I am a supporter of all animal rights. I like rabbits and love them and keep them, lovingly, pampered in their little hutch and feed them lettuce every day, their little rabbit lives. Oh, by the way, would you like to join me for a lovely vegetarian dinner? So as you can see, don't take things out of context. And don't try and make a quote do what it can't do or what it's not really represented or supposed to do. I really don't want to see that. That's very bad behavior, taking quotes out of context like that. Do not get into that habit and don't support those who do it. It's a bad behavior. Okay, so those are really basically your quotation items. And then what we have right here is what does a quote require in basics. Okay. For all of these, anytime you quote for me, you're going to need the following items: in interpretive, context sentence, a complex signal phrase, smooth transition into quoted material, an accurate quotation, a correct in-text citation, and correct punctuation at the end. Write these 6 items down. I mean, ideally, you should have been writing most of these down in your notes right now. But these 6 very specifically, I do want you to have written down because they are very important and we will be using it regularly. And this, these 6 items, you're going to need to refer to them many times in quizzes, going forward. So you need to have this written down and accessible. Put it in your notebook. You're going to be using it a lot and you're going to be using it next week, just to start with. Okay, so that's the start. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the quotation quiz that you're going to take with me. This is an introduction to quotation quiz. So the first, let me check. Yeah, the first 8 questions, all of these, the first 8 questions of that quiz, they are entirely from your hacker. So it's very much a scavenger hunt. You're in the MLA section of your hacker and you're just looking up and writing down what it is, because I want you to look up and say, what's considered a long quotation? What's an ellipsis? What's a bracket? What's a signal phrase? You're going to look it up and write it down. And so the first 8, you're just looking stuff up. Now, the last 4 questions. So question 8, question 9 down through question 12. Now I want you to create examples of quotation forming. So for all of these, you will need an interpretive context sentence, not factual, interpretive. We've talked about that already. A complex signal phrase. So not just the author says, comma. No, it needs to be smooth and complex. It needs to be its own part of a sentence. You need so you need then that smooth transition into quoted material. I shouldn't have to pause. There shouldn't be a comma or a full colon that would need grammatically to be there. You need to have smooth and a transition, a accurate quotation. It needs to be perfect to the original. A correct in-text citation. You will, over the course of this introduction quiz, you will have seen in-text citations, and I encourage you to use your MLA, as a reference. There are 2 kinds of in-text citations we'll be working with: author named in a signal phrase, author not named in a signal phrase. For your first examples of quotation, you are also using a source with pagination, and I'll show you what that can look like. And last but not least, you need correct punctuation. You're going to be doing 4 of those for me, which means you're going to be creating 4. For each one of these, you must use different quotations for each of these, and you must create original complex signal phrases, context sentences. That's essentially an interpretive idea. Think about what's an idea from the book that's interpretive that you would support with argument and quotation. So there are a lot of different ideas. So, okay, so you're going to have an original one of those for each, and then you'll need all those other items. Now, I'm also now going to show you an example of what that looks like. And I encourage you to write this down in your notes so that you can refer to it during the quiz itself, because that quiz can be long and you're going to want to make sure that you look back at it multiple times. So what do you need for a correct direct quotation? Now, here are those 6 items that I just talked through again: interpretive context sentence, complex signal phrase, smooth transition, accurate quotation, in-text citation, and correct punctuation. And the example that I'm creating for you is an author not named in a signal phrase. That influences what goes into my in-text citation. Now, first I'm going to go through, see down here, here's the easier version to read. The other one is color-coded. So this is an example of quotation that I created using the Ha-Jin story. So After 2 days of seeing the blatant corruption of the police, Mr. Chu makes a deliberate choice to harm them by taking actions to spread his hepatitis. Okay, what makes this interpretive? What makes it interpretive is I'm saying that it's seeing the blatant corruption of the police alters him in some way, that it's a deliberate choice to harm, and he's deliberately choosing to spread his hepatitis. These are the things that makes it interpret. Okay. It is clear that he is aware and willing to harm innocent people as well when, sorry, I'm just going to take this out because this is just from my sample. Okay. It is clear that he is aware and willing to harm innocent people as well when in his chest he felt as though there were a bomb. If he were able to, he would have razed the entire police station and eliminated all their families. Though he knew he could do nothing like that, he made up his mind to do something. Okay, so this is one of my favorite quotes from the Jean story. It's very evocative. I like the language a lot. It would give me a lot to talk about. This sample that I'm giving you, after, if you wrote this in a paragraph, it'd be a good start. After this, I would then want to see a real explanation of how did this quote prove this thing that you're talking about up here? How does it push your argument forward? Okay. Now, so this is the kind of thing. Now, obviously, your context sentences are going to look like you created them. They're going to be in your language. It's okay. I don't expect to see fancy words. What I'm interested in is interpretive ideas and an interesting quote that helps support them. All right. So this is what the kind of thing you're going to end up with down here. Now let's look over here where I've color coded. So interpretive context sentences in blue. See what's in blue is after 2 days of seeing the blatant corruption of the police, Mr. Chu makes a deliberate choice to harm them by taking actions to spread his hepatitis. That's me making an interpretive statement that's going to help me start a whole paragraph. This is the kind of thing that would start a paragraph. Okay. So this is the idea that it's deliberate. He's choosing it. You could also go a lot of ways and say, oh, he has been radicalized. I could change it a lot, but this is an interpretive context sentence. It's the start. Complex signal phrase. It has to be more than this author said, and there's my quote. It is clear that he is aware and willing to harm innocent people as well when notice this is a separate sentence than my context sentence. So this is completely, there's a period at the end of my context sentence and I started a new sentence to start my signal phrase. Signal phrases are also most useful when they actually bring in information and are kind of worth their place in what you're writing. Smooth transition is underlined when in his chest. Basically what I'm doing is I take my quotation that I'm interested in that helps support my context sentence and my signal phrase, I link them up together. So I build my signal phrase to draw me smoothly into that quotation. So you can see, it is clear that he is aware and willing to harm innocent people as well when in his chest, notice I didn't have to pause. There's no comma. There's no full colon there. I don't need them. Okay. Accurate quotation is in olive. In his chest, he felt as though there were a bomb. If he were able to, he would have razed the entire police station and eliminated all their families. Though he knew he could do nothing like that, he made up his mind to do something. If you look in the short story Saboteur, you will find this sentence and you'll find these sentences exactly as I've presented them. I haven't altered anything. There are ways to adjust what goes in there through an ellipsis or a bracket. You'll learn about them over the course of this quiz. But for this example, I just pulled a straight one. We'll work with ellipses and brackets going forward. Okay, in text citation. Here, there are models for both author not named in the signal phrase and author named in the signal phrase. What goes in here depends on what is here. If I had named my author saying, oh, Ha-Jin wrote this, to show that he is, that Mr. Chu is aware and willing to harm innocent people, that would have been author named in the signal phrase. And in that situation, what was in my text citation would have been only the page number. My author is not named in the signal phrase. If my author is named in the context sentence or 5 times down here, doesn't matter. We only look at what's in the signal phrase. This is what's in the signal phrase. My author is not named. Therefore, what goes into my in-text citation is a certain formula. MLA formulas are distinct to MLA. Chicago, APA, these have different formulas. I want you to know how to do these using the textbook. I don't expect you to be memorizing this. You can make notes, you can learn how to do it because I'm teaching you in an MLA, but I want you to make certain that if you go into another class and they ask you to use APA, you're still learning to use it based on the formulas from your hacker book, and you haven't tried to memorize this. This will make you much more flexible if you have to switch between different methodologies, because I don't want you to just memorize MLA. You don't have to. This makes you able to switch between different classes. Okay. So my in-text citation goes here. And then, so it's precise. This is author's last name, space, page number it came from. It is kind of hilarious that my page number was 666. I swear that one's not deliberate. Okay, and punctuation. Notice it's over here. It's in yellow. It shows up a little worse. Basically, if I end at the true end of my quoted sentence, then I don't end on the period. It just goes over here, bumps over to the outside of my in-text citation, because my in-text citation needs to be in the sentence. Basically, all of this is considered to be one sentence in my paper, because the quote to quote, that just shows me, okay, I'm using someone else's language. Double quote starts me, double quote ends me. Okay. So remember, you can look through this. I really encourage you, write all this down in your own notes so that you have this reference. The lovely thing about this video is it means you can rewind as often as you want. You can write down exactly what I have written down here. You can make notes. You can do anything you want. I encourage you to do all those things before you take the quotation introduction quiz. That quiz must be done in one sitting. We will have a redo option, but what's very critical is to make certain that you go into it with as much information as possible. Remember, you will need your copy of Everything That Rises Must Converge. You will need your hacker, and you will definitely need as many of these notes as you've written down as possible. And remember, we will be working with quotation in detail for many weeks. So if you're still looking at this and kind of scratching your head a little bit, do your best on the quiz. You will have revision opportunities, and we will be going over and through and around and circling over quotation many, many times. By the time we are done, you will be with this course, if you go to the end, you will be very comfortable with quotation, because we are going to be doing it for a long time. And that's the end of my quotation introduction video. I hope that it was useful. Remember, we'll be working on this for a long time in the course, and I hope that you can come back and refer to this as often as you need, and you can go through it step by step at your own pace. And if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to email me for follow-ups and anything else that's going on. If after a few weeks you really feel like you're still at sea, you're still adrift when it comes to quotation use, definitely contact me and we'll set up. By then I should have some samples of your homework. We should have gone through some revisions, and I should be able to also see where you yourself are struggling. So if by 3 to 4 weeks from now, basically by the time we're starting that first essay, if you're struggling with quotation a lot, not just little things, but the basics of it, then we need to set up a conference. Otherwise, we are going to be doing many exercises. So you should start making progress by the time we have our first essay due. All right. I hope this has been useful, and I will connect with you again later. Bye.